All right, good evening, students. I trust that you all are well, and thank you for availing yourselves to attend this session. All right, now please note, students, that this is a session for ECS1501 students. All right, and for the next 5 weeks, including today, so for the next sessions, we will have this is going to be for ECS1501. All right. And then in addition to this session, which takes place on a Wednesday, we will have another session on Thursday, right, for 1 hour. And then the next hour is reserved for ECS 1500 students. Are we together? So I'm going to type it in the chat, students. So for the next 5 weeks, including today, we will be having ECS 1501 on a Wednesday. From 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Right, and of course from Thursday, we will have it from 7:30 up until 8:30. Are we together, students? So the Wednesday session is going to take place for the next 5 weeks. So for the next 5 weeks, we will have a session on Wednesday. But our Thursday sessions, students, will end until will end when you write your exams. Right? This is for ECS 1501. Even that you guys receive the emails of these sessions. Are we sorted, students? Are we sorted? Can we start? Perfect. Okay. So allow me to share my screen. So we've made some progress, students, when it comes to utilities. I remember our session on Monday. For those that attended the session on Monday, we started with utilities. All right. Let me also just open our notes as well, just for context purposes. Right. So these notes over here, students, is practically a formula sheet, but it contains some useful notes, especially on utilities. All right. So for consumer theory, students, this is right, the theory of demand. Right, that is, I think it is unit 10, right? So consumer theory, that's unit 10. So the main aim of the consumer, right? The main aim of the consumer is to maximize utility. Remember, the consumer demands, the consumer consumes. The aim of the consumer is to maximize utility by consuming goods or services. Are we together, students? That is the aim of the consumer, right? Is to maximize utility. So what is utility? Utility is basically just, it can be interpreted as the satisfaction, right, that the consumer derives from the consumption of goods and services, right? It's just the I know satisfaction can be it's an emotive word, it is a dark word as well, but please note that it is just it is the satisfaction that they derive, from the consumption of goods and services. And of course, what we need to know, students, is that the more we consume, the more we consume, remember we consumers say the more we consume, the higher the total utility that we derive. We can also talk about utility as the enjoyment that we derive from the consumption of goods and services. The higher the total utility, however, total utility will increase and reach a maximum, right? Total utility will increase and reach a maximum. Thereafter, it will decline. Remember the law of gravity? What comes up will eventually come down. All right. So the more we consume, yes, the higher is the total utility, the higher the satisfaction or the enjoyment that we are going to experience when consuming those goods and services. However, total utility will increase and reach a maximum. And once it reaches a maximum, students, it will decline thereafter. But what you also need to know, students, is that the more we consume, right, the lower the marginal utility. Marginal utility is a very important concept in this unit. Marginal utility. So what is marginal utility? Marginal utility is basically the change in total utility or the additional utility that you derive from consuming another unit of that good or service. Are we together, students? That is basically what is marginal utility. It is defined as the additional utility or the additional satisfaction or the additional enjoyment that you derive from consuming one more unit of that good or service. Are we together? That is marginal utility. And what you need to also know, students, is that the more you consume, the lower the marginal utility, right? So marginal utility will decline and reach zero, right? It will decline, reaching zero. Thereafter, the more you consume, it will go into the negative. And if it goes into the negative, that is where you begin to experience what we call disutility. Also, what you need to know is, students, when total utility is at its maximum, right? That is the point at which marginal utility equal to zero. If total utility is at its maximum, marginal utility is equal to zero. And that is also the point, students, if you consume one good or service. Now, this is in the context of one good or service, right? That is also the point at which your utility is maximized from the consumption of one good or service. Are we in agreement, students? Are we together? That is basically the backstory when it comes to utilities. All right. Now, I am under the impression that you have actually, sat down with the theory or studying the theory, etc. All right. What I'm also going to do is that I have a PDF version of a textbook, that is very, very useful. So if you don't have a PDF version of the textbook, right, please do share your UNISA email in the chat, and then I will share it with you via email. All right. It's a PDF version of a textbook, which is very, very useful. Anyway, let's continue. Context is important, students. So total utility is at its maximum when marginal utility is equal to zero. We also can agree that utility is maximized if you are consuming one good, right? That is also the point at which total utility is maximized. Now, when total utility, remember total utility rises the more we consume. Now, the more it rises, it reaches a maximum, and when it starts to decline, so we can say over here, when total utility starts, when total utility starts to decline, then that's the point where marginal utility goes into the negatives. And when marginal utility goes into the negative, students, that is where you begin to experience this utility. Because let's say you are full after eating 2 hamburgers or 2 Big Macs or what you call the burgers at McDonald's, those McFeast, something like that. Right? I haven't had McDonald's in years, and chances are that I will never have McDonald's ever in my life. But anyway, um, let's now say that you are full after eating 2 McDonald's burgers, right? Your utility is maximized, total utility is at its maximum, your marginal utility is equal to 0. But now you are getting a little bit greedy. You know that you are full after eating the 2 burgers, but now you are consuming more. Do you see? The more you consume thereafter, you're gonna start feeling sick. You're not going to be feeling so good. And once that happens, students, you are experiencing this utility. Are we together? You are experiencing this utility. So when your marginal utility, also what you can include over here, students, right? When marginal utility, when marginal utility is equal to 0, and this is for the consumption of one good or service. When your marginal utility is equal to 0, that is also your point of satiation. You are satiated. You are full, right? When your marginal utility is 0 for one good, that means after the consuming that unit of that good where marginal utility is 0, you are satiated. You are full. You see? Then also when marginal utility, I think I've typed this before, eh? When marginal utility is negative. So that means, let's say you full, like I made the example about the 2 hamburgers. You are full, but now you start to consume more after that. You want to cram in maybe another 2 hamburgers thereafter, but you know you full after eating just 2 burgers. You see, that is when you are going to be experiencing negative marginal utility. And when your marginal utility is negative, students, you are experiencing this utility. Are we together? Are we together, students? Perfect. So context is key. All right. Now let's look at some questions. All right. Let's look at some questions. So I think we've done this with the class on Monday. However, I see most of you faces are relatively new, so let's continue with this. Okay. We're not going to worry so much about cardinal utility, right? Because cardinal utility, you can find that in the textbook. You can find that in the notes, students. What is the meaning of cardinal utility, right? But marginal utility, I've just defined it in the beginning, is and please note that this is an old paper from, I think, the 2016, but the theory still remains the same. I'm going to share this paper with you as well. It is the extra utility that the consumer derives from consuming an additional unit of a good, right? That is question 32. I think this was, let me just go back to the beginning of the question. I want you to make a note of this. of the second semester. Right, so the important thing is just context and using what we know and applying it to answer the. This is 26, it's 9 years ago, but still relevant. I want you to make a note of it, eh? That's 2016 questions that we are doing now. So from question 30 onwards. I know I'm passing, I'm over here and I'm over there. So do bear with me, students. If I'm going too fast, please let me know in the chat. I am monitoring the chat on my side as well. So please feel free. I see you've shared with me your email addresses, so that's perfect. I will share the textbook with you thereafter, by latest this evening. So that was question 32. Then question 34, which of the following is a feature of utility? And what you also need to know is utility is a subjective measure, right? Utility differs from person to person. For example, I can, my utility can be maximized after eating just one hamburger, whereas another person's utility can be maximized by eating a quarter of a burger, or a half a burger, or 3 burgers, or 7 burgers. You see, utility is a subjective concept, it's a subjective measure. It differs from person to person. Also, it differs from time to time. It differs also from place to place, right? Who knows? 5 years ago, I could have easily consumed 5 hamburgers. But now I'm into all of these health programs, etc. This is hypothetically speaking. Now I can only eat one, or I can only eat a half. I'm only full after one, or I'm full after half. You see, utility differs from time to time. Utility also differs from place to place. Who knows? A person in America can eat 25 hamburgers, right? Whereas a person in South Africa can only eat 4. Do you see? And another person in Southeast Asia can maybe eat only 3. Do you see? It differs from from place to place. Okay. So which of the following is a feature of utility? So we are looking for features of utility. Okay. If you look at option number 1, it says the utility a consumer gains from consuming a product is determined objectively. It's not determined objectively because utility is a subjective concept, right? We cannot assume that seeing that one person eats 2 hamburgers and are full, all persons will eat 2 hamburgers and are full. No, we can't do that. So utility is determined subjectively, not objectively, right? And of course, it's based on people's feelings. I mean, you feel full. I feel full after 2 hamburgers. I feel full after a quarter of a hamburger. You see, it is a subjective concept. So that word over there should have been subjectively, in order for it to be right. Okay. If you look at number 2, it says utility is a measure of satisfaction, yes, gain, but then it goes on to lie by saying from producing a good. Remember now, this is the theory of consumer. This is consumer theory. All right. You are consuming the good. You are eating the good. You are drinking the good. Are we together? So you're not producing a good. You are consuming a good. So that word producing should have been consuming over there in order for that to be right. If you look at number 3, it says utility always rises at a constant rate. That is utterly preposterous. Why? Because utility differs from person to person. Who knows, your utility today can rise by 10%. Tomorrow it can rise by 2%. The next day it can rise by 270%. The day thereafter it can rise by a quarter percent. Do you see? Utility does not rise at a constant rate. So that's why option 3 is incorrect over there. But option 4 is correct option 3 is incorrect over there because of that word constant. And then number 4, it says when consuming the same good, utility varies across individual, but I basically just said about hamburgers. All right, that's question 34, students. Option number 4 over there. And this is also an interesting question, question 35 over here. It says the total utility gained from consuming additional units of a good will increase. So remember, the more you consume, students, the higher is your total utility. And what you also need to know, I need to type this in the notes so that I can share these notes with you. And I'm going to type this in capital letters, right? At the first unit of any good or service, right? At the first unit of any good and service, your total utility is equal to your marginal utility. Are we together, students? At the first unit of any good or service, your total utility is equal to your marginal utility. That you must always bear in mind, because that will really help you in doing your calculations, right? So we said that over here, at the first unit of any good, total utility is equal to marginal utility. So that means, students, the more you consume over here, you see the C stands for consume, the higher is your total utility. But at the same time, your marginal utility will start to decline. Do you see? Yes, your marginal utility declines, but it's still positive. Do you see? If your marginal utility declines and reaches 0, that is the point at which your total utility is at its maximum. Total utility is at its maximum, it rises, it reaches its maximum. At the same time, marginal utility declines, it reaches 0 over there. Do you see? So if you look at the question 35, it says the total utility gained from consuming additional units of a good will increase. It will always increase as long as your marginal utility is positive. Yes, of course, marginal utility declines, but it's still positive. You see, total utility increases the more you consume. At the same time, your marginal utility declines. But whilst it's declining, it is still positive. And whilst it's still positive, your total utility will keep on increasing and increasing and increasing. Only when your marginal utility reaches 0, that is the point at which your total utility is maximized, you see. So if you look at question 35 again, it says the total utility gained from consuming additional units of a good will increase as long as your marginal utility is positive. Are we together, students? Are we sorted? Please, if we are not together, let me know in the chat. It's very, very important, right? I want you all to pass. Okay, you have an assignment that is due, even though it's open book, but it might be, I'm sure it's a timed assignment. But I don't want you to, I want you to finish off on a high. That is the aim. All right, I tend to talk too much. Let me continue. Alrighty then, let's look at question 36 over here. Okay. Question 36 says, which of the following statements is correct? All right, I'm sure you've seen it. It does look a little bit like a dog's breakfast over here. But let's read statement number 1. It says the more units a consumer consumes consecutively of a product, the greater the marginal utility. That's incorrect, eh? Because the more you consume of a good, the higher is the total utility, yes. But marginal utility will continue to decline. Do you see? So this word over here should have actually been smaller for that statement to be correct. And in economics, students, please note that your statement must be 100% correct. Not 95%, not 90%, not 99%. It must be 100% correct. So my advice to you is read all of your options. Okay. The more we consume of a good, the lower or the smaller the marginal utility, not the greater the marginal utility. So that word should have actually been smaller. That's why it is incorrect over there. And then if you look at statement number 2, it says the more units a consumer consumes consecutively of a product, it goes on to lie by saying the smaller the total utility. But the more you consume, the higher the total utility. You see? So this word over here should have been greater, and this word over here should have been smaller for these statements to be correct. Do you see? So statement 1 and statement 2 is incorrect. Because also there's no option over here that says none of the above statements are correct, you see. So that means statement 3 has to be correct. Let's read statement 3. It says, when the marginal utility becomes negative, it is called disutility. That is absolutely correct. Because that is what it says according to the theory over there. Are we together, students? So our answer over here is statement number 3, and then if you choose the correct answer, it is option number 3 over here. Only statement 3 is correct. All right. Now let's move on to question 37. This is very, very important for you to note, students. Right? It says over here, a consumer is in equilibrium. Right? Consumer equilibrium is when the weighted marginal utilities or the marginal utilities per rand are equal to one another, especially if you are consuming 2 or more goods. Are we together, students? If you are consuming 2 or more goods, the condition for consumer equilibrium will be where your weighted marginal utilities or your marginal utilities per rand are equal to one another. That is the condition that must hold over there. And once that condition holds, that is your consumer equilibrium. Okay. So the answer for that question over there is option number 1. Consumer equilibrium has nothing to do with average utility, has nothing to do where the marginal utility is at its maximum, or where the weighted marginal utility is at the maximum. No. It is where the weighted marginal utilities or the marginal utilities per rand. Now, these are synonym students. Synonyms are very, very important. What you also need to know is that weighted, sorry, the caps lock is still on. That weighted marginal utility is the same as marginal utility per rand. We in South Africa, all right? So we use the rand, which means that weighted marginal utility, normally denoted by that abbreviation, is the same as the marginal utility divided by the price. That is the marginal utility per rand. Are we together, students? Synonyms are very, very important. Okay? Synonyms are extremely important. Now, we've done this question with the students on Monday. However, we can go over this again. But it's very important. We can afford to take our time over here. So it says over here, questions 38 and 39 are based on the table below. Use the data to answer these questions. Now, so we were given the units, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The units are in kilograms. What we were given over here is the total utility for apples, the total utility for bananas, and the total utilities for oranges in utils. It doesn't matter over here. The word utils doesn't matter. It's just to show the utility over here. All right. So this consumer consumes apples, bananas, and oranges. But let's look at the question. Okay. The question says over here. So I think we did this on a PDF. Yeah. That was 2 days ago. I'm just opening up this specific question over here, students. All right. And I know we did this together. All right. So can you all see? It's worth to go through it again. Can you all see my screen, students? Perfect. All right. Let's go through it. Now you see the amounts in blue over here. These were the amounts that we added. Okay. we were only given the total utilities, but what we calculated over here was the marginal utilities and the weighted marginal utilities for each of the goods. Right? Now, please note, students, very, very importantly, at the first unit of output, not the first unit of output, sorry, at the first unit of any good, the marginal utility and the total utility are always equal to one another because that is our starting point. You see here for bananas, the total utility was given as 64. The marginal utility is also 64. You see. For oranges, it was given as 100, the total utilities, which means that the marginal utility is also equal to 100. Are we following? Are we following, students? Jolly good. Okay, let's move on. If we go back to our notes, right, there's some formulas here. You see, calculating the marginal utility is the change in total utility divided by the change in the consumption of the good, right? So we were given our total utilities over here. So to get the marginal utility of 68, how did we get that 68? We took this total utility of 188 and we minus the previous total utility of 120 and we got 68 over here. The change in the consumption is simple. It's just equal to 1 because you see it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 2 minus 1 is 1. 3 minus 2 is 1. You see, so we don't have to worry about calculating the change in the consumption because the change in the consumption is equal to 1 in this case over here. So we only look at the change in the total utility. So 188 minus 120 gave us 68 over there. How did we get to this 38 of marginal utility? We took the 226 minus the 188 over there. We got 38 over here. We also took the 256 over here. We minus the 226 and we got 30. Thereafter, we took the 280 minus the 256 and we got to the 24. So what we did over here is we used the total utilities, students, to calculate the marginal utilities. Are we together? Because look, we need marginal utilities and we also need weighted marginal utilities to calculate consumer equilibrium. Because the question expects us to calculate consumer equilibrium, you see. So we have to, dig a little bit deeper over here and read between the lines. Even though it wasn't given to us, we still have to calculate it. Do you see? And that's going to be the expectation. All right. Now, before we go into the weighted marginal utilities, let's just go over the marginal utilities for bananas. Right? So we got the 64 because according to theory at the first unit, the total utility and the marginal utility is equal to one another. Right? So how did we get the 30? It's the 94 minus the 64. That is 30 over there. How did we get to the 25? It is the 119 over here minus the 94. That gave us 25. So 134 over here minus 119 gave us 15 over here. 144 minus 134 gave us 10 over here. So now we have succeeded in calculating our marginal utilities for bananas. We are going to do the same for oranges over here. Again, at the first unit, total utility and marginal utility are equal to one another. Then, of course, we took the 144 over here minus the 100 over there and we got 44. That's our marginal utility. We took the 180 minus the 144. That is the 36 over here. We took the 210 minus the 180. That's equal to 30 over here. And we took the 234 over here minus the 210. That gave us 24. Are we together, students, with how we got our marginal utilities over there? Alrighty then. So these calculations, any calculation on utility, students, will be given to you in a table. All right. So let's continue. Thereafter, we calculate the important part, which is the weighted marginal utility. Weighted marginal utility are also known as marginal utility per rand. All right. So, in order to calculate this, students, we need the price of oranges, bananas, and apples. You see, and the prices will always be given to you. You will never be in a situation where you have to smell what the prices is. Yes, I'm going to look at another example where the prices can be calculated. Do you see? But in this example over here, the prices were given to us. You see over there? It's 10 Rand per kilogram. So now we're calculating the weighted marginal utility. Remember my weighted marginal utility? It is the marginal utility divided by the price, not the marginal utility divided by the units. It is the marginal utility divided by the price. And it says over here, students, that bananas and oranges and each of these products, so all the apples, bananas, and oranges, all of them cost 10 Rand per kilogram. So the prices of apples is 10 Rand, that of bananas is also 10 Rand, that of oranges is also 10 Rand. So how did we get the weighted marginal utility over here? We took the 120 divided by 10 and we got 12 over there. We took the 68 over here divided by 10, we got 6.8 over there. We took the 38 over here divided by 10, we got 3.8. And we took the 30 over here, we divided by 10, we got 3. Thereafter, we took the 24, we divided it by 10, and we got 2.4. On this side, we took the 64 over here, divided it by 10 because the price of bananas is also 10 Rand, we got 6.4. We took the 30 divided by 10, we got 3. We took the 25 divided by 10, we got 2.5. And we took the 15, we divided it by 10, we got 1.5. And of course, we took the 10 divided by 10, we got 1 over here. And we did the exact same thing for oranges. For a marginal utility of 100, we divided it by 10 Rand because again, the prices of oranges is also 10 Rand. We got 10 over here. The 44 divided by 10, that's the 4.4. 36 divided by 10, that's 3.6. 30 divided by 10, that is 3. And 24 divided by 10, that's 2.4. All right, so now we have concluded our table over here. So now we will be able to calculate or determine the consumer equilibrium, you see. So the consumer equilibrium, we will find the consumer equilibrium as long as this condition holds, where the weighted marginal utilities for apples is the same as the weighted marginal utility for bananas, also the same as the weighted marginal utility for oranges. So now we need to look at the weighted marginal utilities over here. And that is how we found our answer, right? We see 12 is over here. 12 doesn't appear there. Don't even bother wasting your time looking for another 12. If 12 does not appear here or here, leave it. That's not the condition over there. You see 6.8 is over here. There's no 6.8 over there. It has to appear 3 times in order for it to be considered an instance of consumer equilibrium. You see 3.8 over here? There's no 3.8. We don't even bother looking further. There's a 3 over there. There's a 3 over there. And there's a 3 over there. Do you see? There's the instance of consumer equilibrium. Then, of course, there's 2.4 over here, but there's no 2.4 here. Again, it appears here, but it's not a condition for consumer equilibrium because it must appear 3 times. Are we together? So the only instance of consumer equilibrium is where the weighted marginal utility is 3. Do you see? So now let's see. For apples, where the weighted marginal utility is 3, how many kilograms of apples? It's 4 kilograms of apples. Do you see? If you look at bananas, where the weighted marginal utility is 3, that is where it is 2 kilograms of bananas. You see? For oranges, where's the 3? It's over here, but where the kilogram is 4. So the optimal bundle or the bundle for consumer equilibrium is 4 kilograms of apples, 2 kilograms of bananas, and 4 kilograms of oranges. Hence, our option over there is option number 1. We could also test it because it has to exhaust all of John's income of 100 Rand. You see? So let's do it. Let's do the additional calculation over here just to prove that this is our consumer equilibrium. Remember, for something to be consumer equilibrium, this condition must hold, but also if you multiply the quantities with the respective prices and we add them all together, it must be equal to our income over here. So let's test. So it's 4 kilograms of apples, eh? So 4 kilograms of apples, the price of apples is 10 Rand a kilo, right? So 4 kilograms of apples plus 2 kilograms of bananas. 2 kilograms of bananas. Bananas also cost 10 Rand plus 4 kilograms of oranges. You see. So 4 kilograms of oranges also cost 10 Rand. If we add them all together, so 4 times 10 is 40. Plus 2 times 10, that's 20. Plus 4 times 10 is 40 again. And if we add them all together, it gives us 100. You see, it equals to our income over there. It exhausts all of our income. So that makes this bundle over here our optimal bundle. Are we together, students? There's a what question do I need to repeat, ma'am? You said repeat the question. What question? So we just use this over here to prove that 4 kilograms of apples, 2 kilograms of bananas, and 4 kilograms of oranges is our optimal bundle, is our consumer equilibrium. What we did over here is we took the quantities over here, the 4, the 2, and the 4, and we just multiplied it by their respective prices. We add them all together, and it should equal up to the income level of 100 over here, of 100 Rand. That is how we prove that option number 1 is our correct answer. But look, option number 1 is our correct answer because there's only one instance in this table where the 3 appears over here, it appears over there, and it appears over there. There's only one instance where the weighted marginal utilities are equal to one another. Are we together? Are we together, students? Perfect. But please note, there will definitely be instances, right? Or some examples where you see over here, there's only one instance where the weighted marginal utilities are equal to one another in this example. But in other examples, you can have more than one instance where this condition holds. Even though we have more than one instance where this condition holds, only one of those instances will be our consumer equilibrium. And then we have to multiply it with the respective prices to see that it is equal to the income over here. This is another example that I just want to show you before we go on to the other examples, students. What I've just mentioned now, If you look at this one over here, I know it looks a little like a dog's breakfast, but these values were given. We didn't have to calculate anything over here. These values were given to us, Okay. Can you all see this, students? I'm also going to share this with you. I'm going to share it in the OneDrive folder, and then you will have access to it. Right? Are we all sorted? Can you all see it? I'm just using this to illustrate my point over here. Okay. So it says, don't worry about refer to the article, doesn't matter. It says, suppose a customer in South Africa has 500 Rand to spend on quotas, chiprels, and maguinias, right? It says over here, the price of a quota is 40 Rand. The price of a chiprel is 30 Rand. The price of a maguinia is 16 Rand. What we also have over here, students, is the marginal utility, the total utility, and the weighted marginal utility. Are we together? That is what we see over there, right? I'm just looking at the question over here. It says, sir, what if they don't give us the options to choose from, but we are given blank spaces to fill in the correct combination? How will we know which one to choose? Basically, if we were just given the table, then we would have to choose the correct combination directly from the table. I believe your assessment will be MCQ. Am I correct? It will be multiple choice. So if it's going to be multiple choice, you will get the list of options, right? But you still have to do the calculation to ensure that I know it. Look, they could ask the question in this way where they don't give you the options, all right? So you just have to ensure that your option is correct. That's why we are doing this example over here, because in this example we have more than one instance. Are we together? So are we following? So basically what your question is about over here, we are doing that example. Right? So I need you to pay close attention. I can't use the editing over here, students, because oh, you can. Perfect. Thank you. I didn't know that. This is so nice. Of course, I couldn't get the dots away over there, but that's fine. Uh, we need to get in touch with technology, eh? I mean, we need to be, I'm sure we all are embracing technology. All right. Now, let's see. Look, these values were already given to us in the table. So we did not have to calculate anything over here. Okay. So now the question is actually, what is the total utility if the consumer is in equilibrium? But before we get to this answer over here, students, we must first determine what is the consumer equilibrium. Are we together? We must first determine what is the consumer equilibrium. And that is what we are going to do. Okay. So remember, for consumer equilibrium, students, the condition must hold, eh? The weighted marginal utility for quarters must be the same as the weighted marginal utility for chiparals, which is also must be equal to the weighted marginal utility for Maguinias. All right. Now let's do this. We're only looking at the marginal utility per rands, but that's also the weighted marginal utility. Okay. Let's see. 10 appears, there's a 10 over here, but there's no 10 over here. So we don't bother looking at that. There's 8.8 here, but there's no 8.8 here. Are we together? So we don't look at that. There's a 7 here, there's a 7 there, but there's no 7 there. And please, students, do not be tempted to take 6.9 as a 7. Nope. 6.9 is 6.9, and 7 is 7 in this regard. Are we together, students? If you get a table such as this with the values already populated over there, then you leave it as is. Right? You leave it as is. Okay? Please put down your questions in the chat, if there's a question. You leave it as is. That's why we said there's a 7 there. Yes, there's a 7 there, but there's no 7 there, so we don't even bother looking at that. 5.5 is over here. There's no 5.5 there, and there's no 5.5 there. Right? There's a 4 over here. There's a 4 over there, and there's a 4 over there. There's our first instance. You see. Also, there's a 2 over here. There's a 2 over there, and there's a 2 over there. In addition to that, there's a 1 over here, there's a 1 over there, and there's a 1 over there. Are we following that, students? So now there are 3 instances where the condition for equilibrium holds. But please note, only one of those instances will be our true consumer equilibrium. Are we together? Because there's only one true consumer equilibrium. There cannot be more than one. Okay, so now let's look at the first instance. I'm going to type it here, but it's already there. So at the first one, it is 5 quotas, right? Also 5 chipperals and 4 maguinias. That is our first instance over there, right? The second instance, you see where the 2 is? That is 6 quotas. There's a 2 over here. That's also 6 chipperals. And the 2 over there, that is 5 maguinias. And then the third instance, students, it is 7 quotas, 7 chipperals, and 6 maguinias. Do you see? So now we need to determine which one over here is our true consumer equilibrium. Are we together, students? We need to determine which one of those three is our true consumer equilibrium. So let's do this. Remember, the income that we were given over here was 500 Rand. So what we do is, we take the bundles over here, the combinations, we multiply it by the respective prices, and it will give us 500 Rand. It will either give us 500 Rand or it will not give us 500 Rand. So let's see, the quota is 40 Rand, the price of a chipperl is 30 Rand, the price of a maguinia is 16 Rand. So we take 5 multiplied by 40 because that's the price of a quarter, 5 multiplied by 30 because that's the chipperl, and 4 multiplied by 16, that is the price of a maguinia. So we get 200 plus 150 plus 64. And the total amount over there gives us 414 Rand. However, 414 Rand is not equal to our total income of 500. Do you see? So that means the first instance is not our true consumer equilibrium. Do you see? And if you look at that's the second one over here. Are we together, students? The first one is not our true consumer equilibrium because it did not give us the 500 Rand over there. But if you look at the second one, and please note that time management is of the essence, especially if you have a timed assignment. If you don't have a timed assignment, then you can afford to take your time. All right. But in this case over here, let's look at number 3 because number 2 is actually our correct one over here. Let's look at number 3. So let's test number 3 just to see, just to verify it. So it is 7 quotas multiplied by the price of quotas, which is 40 Rand, plus 7 chipperls multiplied by the price of chipperls, which is 30 Rand, plus 6 maguinias multiplied by the price of maguinias, which was 16 Rand over there. 7 multiplied by 40, that's 280, right? 7 multiplied by 30, that I believe that's 210. And 6 multiplied by 16, I believe that is 96. Am I correct, students? Over there. 6 multiplied by 16, am I correct? 96, perfect. So 280 plus 210, that's 490. 490 plus 96, that is 586. So now you know, students, 586 is not equal to our income, to the income of 500 Rand. So now you see, the third one is not our true consumer equilibrium. Only the second one is, but let's verify it. 6 quarters multiplied by 40, that gives us 240 over there. Plus 6 chipperls, 6 multiplied by 30, that's 180. Plus 5 maguinias multiplied by 16, that's 80. So 240 plus 180, 420, is 500. So now you see, this is our consumer equilibrium. Why? Because it exhausts all of our income. Are we together, students? That is what is going to be required of you. Okay? If there are more than one instance where the weighted marginal utilities are equal to one another, you need to test each and every option. sorry, each and every instance over there. Only one of those instances will be our true consumer equilibrium. Alrighty then, are we together? Then of course, calculating the last part becomes a walk in the park, because we've already determined the consumer equilibrium is 6 quotas, 6 Chiparals, and 5 Maguinas. So we could actually answer the question over here, what is the total utility if the consumer is in equilibrium? So what we basically do over here, we just take the total utility at 6 quotas. We take the total utility at 6 Chiparals. And we take the total utility at 5 Maguinas. And we add them all together and we get 2,854 utils as our answer. That is the total utility at equilibrium. Are we together, students? I'm going to send you this example as well. I'm going to upload it onto the SharePoint folder. And I want you to have a look at it, and I want you to listen to this recording once it becomes available. Also, if you need this recording as soon as possible, students, please reach out to ctn.at unisa.ac.za. Note that I have been busy for the past few weeks, but for the next few weeks, I will be availing myself for one-on-one consultation. All right, so please do send through your consultation request. All right, and then we will take it from there. Let's continue with where we left off on the other question, students. This one, right? So we've calculated for question 38, right? And then question 39, it says over here, at equilibrium, John's total utility will be what? So it's based on this question. So what we did over here, students, we took the total utility at 4 kilograms of apples, plus the total utility at 2 kilograms of bananas, plus the total utility at 4 kilograms of oranges. And what we got over there is 560, which means our answer over here is 560 utils. Are we together, students? Are we happy? Perfect. There's another example that I want to look at. And that is where I believe we did it in our previous classes, but not in this class. So it is in this exam pack, right? It is in the 2017 paper, which is this one over here. Just give me a second. You zoom out a bit over here. So so just make a note of it on your side, students. It is the old paper of 2017, eh? And this one over here, you see, this is the example that we were given. So we can do this one as well. All right, let me just do some housekeeping over here. Okay. Are we sorted, students? Can we see? So make a note of it. We're doing the 2017 question, eh? So in this question, you can see over here, it said Moses enjoys steak and beer. The table below shows the utility Moses gets from consuming steak and beers. Use the following table to answer questions 80 to 20. So we did not get the income over here. Are we together? The income wasn't given to us, right? Also, the price, we don't know the prices of steak and we don't know the prices of beer. But I will send you I will upload the exam pack onto the OneDrive folder. Right, it is in the public domain, but I will upload it and you'll be able to access it. All right, so once we're done with this, I will do a short demonstration on how to get access to the. All right, but you've shared with me also your email addresses, right? In the chat. So if you have never received any emails from me in the past, please put down your emails in the chat. Okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to still upload it onto the OneDrive folder, onto the SharePoint folder, my apologies. But I'm going to share this information with you via email. All right, so that you can have access to it. So then we can move on when we meet next week, Wednesday again. All right, so yeah. But that is just for today, students. After that, you're going to have to obtain it from the SharePoint folder. Okay, let's continue. So what do we know over here? Right, so you see it starts at 0. Normally it starts at 1. So at 0, there's nothing that we can calculate over here. But what do we know at the first unit? You see marginal utility and total utility for stakes are equal to one another. You see. Similarly for beer, total utility and marginal utility are equal to one another. Do you see? But you also see, students, for marginal utility, we consume what happens? Total utility. His total utility increases from 100 to 170 to 200. You see. At the same time, what happens is his marginal utility drops from 100 to 70 to 30. Right? Between this point of view, his total utility probably reaches its maximum, but thereafter it starts to decline. And once total utility starts to decline, students, that is when marginal utility goes into the negative. Do you see? Similarly for beer over here, the more you consume of beer, what happens? Is total utility increases. Do you see? At the same time, what happens? Is marginal utility begins to fall. You see? And then it reaches 0. At this point over here, when marginal utility reaches 0, that is where his total utility for beer is maximized. But if you look at question 18, it says over here, when will the law of diminishing marginal utility for beers set in? Look at beers, the point where your marginal utility starts to decline. So marginal utility, you can see over here, at the first unit, marginal utility was 105. But when he consumed the second beer, his marginal utility begin to decline. Do you see? So when will the law of the marginal utility of diminishing marginal utility for beer set in? That is at the second beer. Are we together, students? That is at the second beer. All right. Look, the answers are also in the back of the pack, eh? So you can practice if you want. All right. Let's look at number 90 because it says over here, what is the cost of beer and steaks, respectively? But the thing is, students, we do not have the price of steak and beer. So we literally have to calculate the price of steak and beer. Do you see? And how do we calculate the price of steak and beer? How? If we were not given the prices of steak and beer, students, right? We look at the weighted marginal utility. All right. I'm going to type it here. Okay. So I'm going to type it here. So to calculate, right, the prices of steak and beer. Remember, we want the price of a beer and we want the price of a piece of steak. Are we together? So it's the price of one beer and the price of a piece of steak. So in order to get that, to calculate the prices of steak and beer, we look at the weighted marginal utilities at, so the weighted margin utilities of both goods at the first unit. We can say the weighted margin utilities at the first unit of both goods. Are we together, students? We have to look at the weighted margin utilities at the first unit of both goods. So let's go back to our table, right? Let's go back to our table over here and let's highlight it. So the weighted marginal utility at the first unit, right, for steak is 2, right? So that for steak is, why does this happen? Okay. So the weighted marginal utility for steak is 2. And the weighted marginal utility for beer is 7, right? How do we calculate marginal? Let's write it in over here, right? So we found the weighted marginal utility for steak. WMU for steak at the first unit is 2A. And the weighted marginal utility for beer at the first unit is 7. What is the formula for weighted marginal utility, students? It is the marginal utility divided by the price. Am I correct? Are we together? It's the marginal utility divided by the price. But we don't have the price, you see, but we have the final answer. So now to get the answer over here, it will look something like this. Okay, if I can maybe just write it in this way, right? So to get that for steak, remember steak is 2. We have the weighted marginal utility for steak for 2, right? So it is equal to, what is the marginal utility at the first unit again? The marginal utility is 100. You see, because we need the marginal utility as well. So the marginal utility is 100. Okay, so the price over here, if we don't have the price, we make that equal to X. You see. So what we are going to do is to get the answer, students, we're just going to cross multiply. So the X multiplied by the 2. So we are going to be left with 2X, right? 2X is equal to 100. And then to get X on its own, we divide both sides by 2. And if we do that, X over here, X, sorry, I should have actually done this. So if we do that, we're just going to continue over here. X is equal to 50. So that means, students, the price of a steak, the price of a steak is 50 Rand. Are we together? What our answer over there, students? The price of a steak is 50 Rand. Okay. Now you can see over here, there's no other instance where the price of steak is 50 Rand. So we could have, to save some time, we could have just taken option 4. But let's test for that of beer. Let's test for that of beer. All right, let's do the same for beer. Let me just draw that for beer. So for beer, the weighted marginal utility is 7, right? But what was utility? The marginal utility at the first unit is 105. So 105 over here. And again, we don't have the value of the price over there. So that would become X. You see, so it's 105 over X. You see. It does look a little bit like a 4-year-old is drawing the students, but please note that is unfortunately the downside if you're drawing on a PDF with your free hand. So we do cross multiplication, so that x multiplied by 7. So we are going to be left with 7x is equal to 105. And to get x on its own, we divide both sides by 7. And in doing so, students, I believe if you take 105 and you divide it by 7, it gives you 15. Am I correct? 105 divided by 7 is 15, all right? So the price of beer, that means the price of beer is 15 Rand. Which you can see over there, our answer is option number 4. Are we sorted, students? Our answer over there is option number 4. Then we can even do question 20. You see now, there they bring in the 160. You see. So this is I want this is actually part of question number 219, eh? So I don't just want this to be a little separate over here because this is part of question 19. All right, let's do question 20 this side. So it says, which of the following combinations will maximize Moses' utility if he has 160 Rand to spend? Let's see. Now we go back to our table. Okay. Students, we look at the weighted marginal utility. All right. So there's a 2 over here for steak, but there's no 2 over here. So we don't bother with that. There's 1.4 over here, and there's a 1.4 over there. You see, there's only 2 goods. So there's one instance. There's a 0.6 here. There's no 0.6 there. Don't waste time looking for 0.6 because there's no 0.6 here. Negative 0.1 here. Nope, there's no negative 0.1 here. Negative 0.4. Nope, there's no negative 0.4 here. You see, so there's only one instance. So 1.4 is over here and 1.4 is over there. So this has to be his condition for consumer equilibrium. So it would then be 2 steaks and 4 beers. Are we together, students? 2 steaks and 4 beers. But we can test it because it has to be equal. That's the only instance over there. Right, let's test the 2 steaks and the 4 beers. Okay. So we agreed that the optimal quantity is 2 steaks and 4 beers. All right, we've calculated the price of steaks and the price of beers. So let's do this. Right. So 2 times 50, because the price of a steak is 50 Rand, plus 4 times 15, that is the price of a beer. So 2 times 50, that is 100. 4 times 15 is 60. 100 plus 60 is equal to 160. And that is definitely our optimal bundle over there. Our true bundle of consumer equilibrium. So it is 2 steaks and 4 beers. And our answer over there is option number 1. Are we sorted, students? Jolly good. All right, let's do 2 more questions because we are supposed to end at 7. Right, just remember, students, we will have another session for 1501. That would be tomorrow evening, 7:30 till 8:30. All right, that's the first hour. And then next week, Wednesday, we will continue from 5 o'clock until 7 o'clock. All right. Now, let's look at the other 2 questions. So we've done this in 2017. Let's go back to the 2016 paper, which is this one. Right. We are going to continue with this, students, revenue and costs and production tomorrow. Okay, because I believe you are submitting your assessment on the 1st of September. Yeah. So let's look at question 40 and question 41. Let's see over here. It says SIPO consumes two goods, which is A and B, right? And of course, students, what we also see over here, there's the price of A and the price of B. Also, students, there's the marginal utility of A and the marginal utility of good B. There's also the total utility of good A and the total utility of good B. So it represents the prices, marginal utility, and total utilities of good A and good B respectively. It says over here, when will CPOR achieve consumer equilibrium? Right? Remember, consumer equilibrium in this case, students, is where your weighted marginal utilities are equal to one another. So his weighted marginal utility for good A is equal to his weighted marginal utility for good B. But you see over there, there's nothing like that says over here, right? We can also rewrite this. Weighted marginal utility for A divided by the price of A is equal to the marginal utility of B divided by the price of B. Do you see? We can rewrite that in this way. And we could, what's the word I'm looking for? We could reorganize this formula. And when we reorganize this formula, students, it will be something like this. Okay. We can rewrite this formula. We can cross multiply, right? We multiply the, right? We can cross multiply over here, and then we are left up when we are left with marginal utility of good A divided by the marginal utility of good B is equal to the price of good A divided by the price of good B. Are we together, students? We can rewrite this formula in that way, and then our answer will be option number 2. You see, our answer will be option number 2. This you will find in the textbook, students. Also, you should find it in your notes, your lecture slides. All right. It has nothing to do with the total utility, students. It also has nothing to do with the differences in the ratio between that. It just means that your weighted marginal utilities for both goods must be equal to one another. And then what we did over here is we simplify the weighted marginal utilities. Right, weighted marginal utility of good A, that's just marginal utility of A divided by the price of good A. Weighted marginal utility for good B, that's the marginal utility for good B divided by the price. And we could have just rewritten this, students. We would have gotten marginal utility of A divided by marginal utility of B, which is equal to the price of A over the price of B. Why did it, you see, it just cut it off over here. Right, let me just move it to the side. All right, so our answer, because there's no option over here that says none of the above. You see, if there was an option over here that says none of the above, that could have been our answer. But we had, this is just this formula over here, this condition was just rewritten from this one over here. All right, that's question number 40. Let's look at question 41. So we have the quantity consumed and we have the total utility. But the question says, at what quantity consumed will diminishing marginal utility begin? Are we together, students? At what quantity will diminishing marginal utility begin? So what we need to do over here is we need to calculate our marginal utility. Remember, at the first unit, total utility and marginal utility are equal to one another. So if total utility was 5, marginal utility is also 5. Right? How do we get the marginal utility over here? It is just a 16 minus the 5. You see, 16 minus 5, that is 11, right? 40 minus 16, that is 24, right? 60 minus 40, that's equal to 20, right? And then 65 minus 60, that is equal to 5. Are we together, students, or how we got our marginal utilities over here? Are we sorted? Perfect. Now let's see. If we move from the first quantity to the second quantity, what happens? Our total utility increases throughout, eh? But what happens to our marginal utility? It increased from 5 to 11. Do you see? If we increase our consumption from the second good to the third good, what happens to the marginal utility? It increases from 11 to 24. Do you see? But if we want to increase our consumption from the third unit to the fourth unit by now consuming the fourth unit, what now happens to our marginal utility? It starts to decline. It declines from 24 to 20. Do you see? So at what quantity consumed will diminishing marginal utility begin? That would be at the fourth unit. Are we together, students? That would be at the fourth unit. Alrighty then. Students, I am going to stop the recording, right? But before you leave, okay, before you leave, I just need you to fill in the